Three men in fake HOA uniforms forced their way into a quiet suburban home demanding access without a warrant. They looked official, but behind the vests were imposters preying on the vulnerable and unprotected. What they didn't expect was 82-year-old Martha Wayne, a quiet veteran nurse with a shotgun and nothing to lose. Just wait until you see how this unbelievable standoff unfolded and why justice in the end hit back harder than anyone imagined. Before we dive into this incredible story, I want to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. Thursday mornings in the suburbs usually come with the same quiet routine: humming lawnmowers, the occasional dog bark, and sunlight spilling through half-closed blinds. That day was no different, at least at first. Ethan Miles, 28, was at his kitchen counter, laptop open, AirPods in, and a hot cup of Colombian roast steaming in his hand. The kind of slow morning that made working from home almost feel like a luxury. Outside, the sprinklers had just kicked in, sending neat arcs of water over the front lawn. Somewhere down the street, a delivery truck rumbled past. Ethan barely registered it. His thoughts were on a Zoom meeting he had in 15 minutes. His grandmother, Martha Wayne, was in the den as usual, sitting in her recliner, a dog-eared romance novel open on her lap. At 82, Martha had the posture of someone who'd lived through storms, both professional and personal, and come out unshaken. She had spent 40 years as an emergency room nurse before retiring. She didn't say much, but her silence held weight. Then came the doorbell, not a normal press but a hard, rapid series of pounds. The kind that makes your chest tighten before your brain catches up. Ethan paused. That sound didn't belong in their quiet neighborhood. He set his mug down, moved to the door, and peeked through the peephole. Three men stood on the porch. Each wore black cargo pants, dark vests with bright white letters that read HOA enforcement. One of them had a clipboard, another wore dark sunglasses despite the shade. All of them had the same look: firm stance, tight expressions, like they expected trouble or maybe planned to cause it. Ethan hesitated before unlocking the door and cracking it open just a few inches. "Can I help you?" The man in front stepped forward, casually resting a hand on the door frame. "Morning, sir. We're conducting an emergency inspection on behalf of the HOA. We'll need to step inside. It won't take long." His tone was firm but rehearsed, like someone playing a part they'd memorized just well enough to sound confident. Ethan blinked. "Emergency inspection? What are you talking about?" The man raised a laminated badge that looked off, no seal, no signature, just a name printed in bold and a logo that might have been copied off a website. "Your property has been flagged for non-compliance. We have the right to inspect the premises for unauthorized modifications. Please open the door." Something felt wrong. Ethan's fingers tightened on the doorknob. "No offense, but I've never heard of anything like this. Do you have a warrant or any paperwork from the actual HOA board?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he shifted the clipboard, now angled toward Ethan as if the paperwork it held would do the talking. But it didn't look official. No signatures, no stamps, just a lot of bolded text and legal-sounding language. Behind him, the other two men stood silently watching, not saying a word. Ethan's heart started to beat faster, his brain catching up to what his gut had already figured out. These guys weren't cops, they weren't HOA, and they definitely weren't supposed to be here. But before Ethan could shut the door, the man in front pushed harder, just enough to wedge his boot between the frame and the threshold. And that's when the energy shifted. Ethan didn't know it yet, but this Thursday morning was about to change his life and put his grandmother's name into headlines no one saw coming. Ethan squinted, still holding the door half closed. His instincts screamed that something was off, but he kept his voice calm. "Inspection from who?" The man in front didn't blink. "Homeowners Association. We're authorized." His words were sharp, clipped, like someone used to getting compliance without questions. He raised a sheet of paper, holding it just high enough for Ethan to glimpse it. It wasn't a legal form, no watermark, no official seal. It looked like something pulled from an email thread and printed at home. The kind of thing that wanted to look official but didn't survive a second glance. Ethan stared at it, then back at the man. "Do you have a warrant?" That question shifted the mood. The second man, the one in sunglasses, tensed slightly. The tallest one tilted his head like Ethan had just asked something offensive. "You don't need a warrant if you're under community violation," he said, voice rising a notch. "Refusal to comply will be noted and reported. You're already in violation. Don't make it worse." Ethan's fingers twitched on the doorknob. He wasn't a lawyer, but he knew enough. This wasn't how things were supposed to work. HOA or not, people couldn't just force their way into your home because of violations. That's what process, paperwork, and actual law enforcement were for. This didn't feel like a warning, it felt like intimidation. "I'm going to need to talk to someone from the actual board," Ethan started, voice tightening. But he never got to finish the sentence. The largest man, muscles thick under his vest, expression flat, leaned in and shoved the door with his shoulder, not hard enough to break anything, just enough to throw Ethan off balance. Ethan stumbled backward, hands reaching out to stop himself. And in that moment the threshold was breached. The second and third men stepped inside like they'd been waiting for that exact second, not rushing, not shouting, just walking in like they owned the place. Their boots echoed on the hardwood. The house, just seconds ago filled with the soft tick of a wall clock and the whir of a ceiling fan, suddenly felt like a trap. Ethan's breath caught, his voice stuck in his throat. He was trying to find the words to tell them to leave, to ask what they were doing, but they were already too far in. That's when they heard the sound. Not footsteps, not a voice. It was the cold, unmistakable click of a shotgun being pumped. From the top of the staircase, silhouetted by the morning light filtering through the second-story window, stood Martha Wayne. One hand steady on the wooden banister, the other gripping a 12-gauge like it was just another tool in the shed. She didn't yell. She didn't ask questions. Her eyes locked on the men below, not with panic or confusion, but with that calm, unshakable presence of someone who had seen worse and come through it standing. "You're not from the HOA, Martha said, voice low but clear. "And you're not welcome here." Everything stopped. The three intruders froze mid-step. Ethan stood there wide-eyed, heart pounding so loud it felt like it echoed in his ears. It was quiet for a moment, but that moment held weight, the kind of weight that told everyone in the room the game had changed. The sound echoed like thunder through the hallway, the metallic, unmistakable slide of a Mossberg 500 pump-action shotgun being chambered. In most homes that sound might cause confusion. In this house it meant one thing: the line had been crossed. Martha Wayne didn't yell. She didn't flinch. She stood tall at the top of the staircase, framed in the morning light, holding the shotgun like she'd been born with it in her hands. Her voice was steady, firm, weathered by time but sharpened by experience. "Out of my house. Now." The words dropped heavy into the silence. Down below, the three men in tactical vests froze like statues. The one in front, the one who had shoved the door open, turned his head slowly toward Martha, as if trying to assess whether she was serious. She was. Everything about Martha said so, from the way she held the shotgun, centered and aimed just enough to mean business, to the cold focus in her eyes. This wasn't someone bluffing. This was someone protecting her home. One of the men, the youngest looking, made a small twitching movement toward his belt. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was uncertainty, maybe he just didn't know how to stand still when adrenaline kicked in. But Martha didn't give warnings twice. In one smooth motion, she raised the barrel and fired, not at them but straight into the ceiling. The blast tore through drywall, sending a cloud of plaster and dust showering down. The walls shook. A ceiling fan above rattled. It wasn't a threat, it was a message. "I said," Martha repeated louder now, "out. Now." They understood. All confidence vanished from their posture. The man who'd reached for his belt backed up, hands in front of him. Another took an unsteady step toward the front door, glancing between the shotgun and the broken ceiling. Ethan, who had been frozen in place this entire time, snapped out of it. His phone was already in his hand, his thumb fumbled across the screen. He didn't need to look, he knew the number by heart. 911, what is your emergency? He kept his eyes on the three intruders as he spoke into the receiver, voice shaking but clear. "We've got 3 armed individuals impersonating HOA inspectors. They forced their way into my home. My grandmother's got a firearm. She's protecting us. Please send officers now." The operator began asking questions, but Ethan's attention was still locked on the scene in front of him. Martha hadn't moved, still standing, still silent, still in full control. The men didn't dare test her again. And in that moment Ethan realized something. This wasn't just a house. This was Martha's house. And no one, absolutely no one, crossed that line and walked away like nothing happened. They didn't run. They didn't argue. They just backed up like shadows retreating from light. The 3 men slowly began to inch toward the door, one cautious step at a time. Their bravado, so firm and calculated minutes ago, was crumbling with every second that Martha Wayne stood on those stairs, shotgun raised, eyes unwavering. They were muttering now words like procedure and inspection mandate, grasping for some thread of authority that had long since snapped. Ethan stood between them and his grandmother, frozen in place, the phone still pressed to his ear. The emergency dispatcher was speaking, asking questions, confirming location, but her voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. He couldn't focus on her. He could barely hear over the sound of his own pulse. Martha hadn't moved. The only shift was a subtle one, a tremor in her left leg where arthritis had left its mark. But her arms steady, her grip solid, her fingers still near the trigger, resting lightly but with purpose. "One move," she said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. Just 3 words, measured and deliberate. Just one. That was all it took. The tallest of the 3, the one who had spoken the most, was no longer making eye contact. His gaze flickered between the door, the stairs, and the shotgun. His shoulders sagged under the weight of reality. The second man, the quiet one, swallowed hard. His hands were now visible, palms out, a universal sign of surrender, even if no one had used the word yet. And the youngest, he looked like he wanted to vanish. His chest rose and fell too quickly. His feet shifted like they were trying to move but couldn't figure out where to go. They weren't enforcers anymore. They weren't officials. They weren't even intimidating. Now, stripped of their act and empty authority, they looked exactly like what they were, 3 men in poorly printed vests caught in a situation they thought they could control. Ethan watched them, saw the fear in their eyes and realized something. These weren't trained professionals. They hadn't expected resistance, definitely not from an 82-year-old woman with arthritis and a shotgun. And that's what made them dangerous. Cornered animals make reckless choices. Martha knew that. That's why she never let the barrel drop. Why she never blinked. Why she stood there like a statue of defiance, carved out of stubbornness and history. Outside, a faint sound, sirens growing louder. Relief and anxiety rushed in all at once. Ethan finally found his voice. "We've got help on the way," he said, mostly to reassure himself. "You might want to stay exactly where you are." The men didn't respond. They didn't move. And Martha, she just held her ground. Because justice sometimes doesn't wear a badge. Sometimes it wears a faded nightgown, orthopedic slippers, and silver hair that's seen more winters than these men had seen birthdays. It took exactly 6 minutes. 6 minutes from Ethan's call to the moment red and blue lights danced across the quiet neighborhood street. The wail of sirens shattered the heavy silence that had taken hold of the house. Ethan stepped back from the door as the 2 police cruisers rolled to a stop in front of the house. Their presence was swift, direct, and unmistakably real, the way true authority enters a situation. Officers exited with practiced urgency. One had a hand near his holster, eyes scanning the front of the house. Another gave quick, clipped instructions into his shoulder radio. They approached the porch with caution. They didn't know what they were walking into yet. From the outside, all they had was a report of armed men and a homeowner with a firearm. The front door was open. Ethan stood there, hands raised just high enough to show he meant no harm. His voice was shaking but clear. 3 men inside impersonating HOA. Forced entry. "My grandmother's armed but we're safe. She's upstairs covering them." The officers didn't waste time. With a nod, one of them entered first, careful, methodical, eyes sweeping the living room. That's when they saw the scene. Martha still at the top of the stairs, holding the shotgun steady but lowered just slightly, her finger no longer near the trigger. Ethan standing off to the side, pale, trembling, phone still in hand. And on the floor, 3 adult men now seated against the wall with their palms turned out, backs tense, expressions empty. One officer stepped forward and calmly addressed Martha. "Ma'am, I need you to set the weapon down and step back slowly." Martha met the officer's eyes. There was no resistance, no hesitation. She nodded once, turned, and gently laid the shotgun on the wooden stair behind her. Then, with one hand on the railing, she made her way down slow, steady, but with the quiet dignity of someone who knew exactly what she'd done and why. The lead officer, whose name tag read Kinslow, took over from there. He surveyed the room like someone used to walking into chaos and finding its center. He turned to Ethan. "Sir, do you want to explain what happened here?" Ethan took a breath, then let the whole story spill out from the pounding on the door to the fake paperwork, the forced entry, and finally Martha's intervention. Kinslow listened closely. He didn't interrupt. His gaze occasionally drifted back to the 3 men sitting on the floor, now looking smaller than ever. With a short motion to his partner, the cuffs came out. No yelling, no dramatics, just quiet, efficient action. Each man was handcuffed without resistance. The officers searched them on the spot. From one, they retrieved a bundle of plastic zip ties, the kind used as improvised restraints. From another, a civilian model taser concealed in a belt pouch. None of them had valid identification, no official credentials, no confirmation from any HO, only a handful of forged documents with HOA letterheads that didn't match the actual files the officers had on record. It was clear now, This wasn't some administrative misunderstanding. It wasn't neighborhood protocol. This was something else entirely. Kinslow glanced at the documents, then at Martha, who now stood quietly near the staircase, arms folded. "Looks like you saved us all a bit of paperwork today, ma'am," he said. Martha didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her job was already done. The rest of that day was a blur of statements, signatures, and evidence bags. Ethan spent hours going over the details with officers. Martha answered what few questions they asked of her, short, direct replies, each one confirming what the scene already made clear. And when all the pieces were laid out, the picture that emerged was worse than anyone expected. The three men had no official connection to the homeowners association. Not now, not ever. They weren't compliance officers. They weren't HOA staff. They weren't even residents of the neighborhood. What they were was something else entirely. Former private security contractors, discharged months ago from a regional firm due to procedural violations. Records showed a history of complaints, overreach, intimidation, unauthorized searches. And yet, instead of stepping away, they banded together. They created their own group, calling it a compliance enforcement initiative, and began patrolling residential communities under the guise of neighborhood regulation. They bought vests online, printed fake inspection letters, even laminated their own name tags, just professional enough to pass at first glance. They had no authority, but that didn't stop them. Over the past few weeks, they'd visited multiple homes across 3 subdivisions, always with the same pattern. They'd pick houses without cameras, elderly residents, newer families, anyone unlikely to question them too hard. Neighbors later reported that they'd issued on-the-spot fines, demanded entry, and in at least 2 cases, threatened consequences for noncompliance. No one had spoken up, not loudly, not until now. When police contacted the actual HOA, the response was immediate and stunned. The board president confirmed no such patrol existed. There were no emergency inspections, and certainly no authorization for home entry. Within hours, the HOA released a written statement. "We are deeply disturbed by the events that occurred today involving individuals impersonating HOA enforcement personnel. We had no knowledge of their actions, and we condemn any attempts to intimidate or mislead residents under false pretenses." But for many in the neighborhood, it was too little, too late. The damage had already been done. These men had walked freely for weeks, acting with an authority no one had given them, and no one had questioned it until now. Martha Wayne hadn't just stopped to break in. She'd pulled the veil off a scheme that had been hiding in plain sight. And in doing so, she reminded the entire street, and maybe a few watching online, that authority without accountability is just a mask. One good look was all it took to tear it off. It started with a simple upload. That evening, after the last patrol car had driven off and the house had finally gone quiet, Ethan sat on the couch and stared at the doorbell cam footage. It was all there, the pounding on the door, the forced entry, and then Martha at the top of the stairs, steady, silent, shotgun in hand. Ethan didn't even plan to go viral. He just wanted to put the truth out there, no edits, no commentary, just the raw, silent story of what happened. He uploaded the video with a short title. "Fake HOA tried to break in. My 82-year-old grandma wasn't having it." He shut his laptop and went to bed. By morning it had over 600,000 views. By the end of the day, 1.3 million and growing. It wasn't just the video. It was the image, the still frame that made the internet take notice. Martha Wayne standing at the top of the stairs in her flowered nightgown and fuzzy slippers, holding a shotgun like it was the remote control to the universe. The memes came fast. "Texas HOA Terminator, don't mess with Grandma M. When HOA meets your nurse," which Ethan quickly flagged and asked people to take down out of respect. "Built different, 1942 edition." Some people added halos and Photoshop. Others turned the video into slow-motion replays with dramatic music. A few made pixel art. The story spread across platforms Reddit, Twitter, TikTok, even a few low-budget reaction channels did breakdowns with exaggerated thumbnails. "You won't believe what this grandma did." Through it all, Ethan kept reading, watching, updating. And Martha? Martha didn't care. When Ethan showed her the view count, Martha just blinked once and said, "Is that good?" Ethan nodded. Martha looked back at the ceiling, still bearing a neat hole the size of a grapefruit, and replied, "Then maybe someone can help patch that." She didn't want likes. She didn't want fame. She wanted her drywall fixed and her house quiet again. But like it or not, Martha Wayne had become something more than a headline. She'd become the calm face of old-school defiance, proof that sometimes standing your ground doesn't need words, just timing, grit, and a steady pair of hands. In the days that followed, life in the neighborhood slowly returned to normal or something close to it. But for the three men who kicked in that door, things were far from routine. Formal charges were filed within 48 hours. Trespassing, impersonating law enforcement, attempted burglary. The evidence was overwhelming: video, forged documents, recovered items, and witness statements. Local media picked up the story almost immediately. Then it spread: regional news, morning shows, even a legal podcast or two. The narrative was simple. Three imposters try to intimidate a family. An 82-year-old woman stops them cold. But what really stuck wasn't the legal side. It was the image: Martha Wayne, quiet, composed, and unshakable. The woman who didn't chase trouble but didn't back down from it either. And people noticed. Strangers began stopping by the house just to say thank you. A retired teacher from 2 blocks over left a handmade card in the mailbox. A family dropped off a pie with a note, "For the woman who reminded us we're not powerless." And then came the brewery. A small craft company from across town delivered a full crate to the front porch. The label on the bottles read, "Martha's Resolve. Age strong." It had a cartoon version of Martha's nightgown, a bold outline of a shotgun, and a tagline that made Ethan laugh out loud: "Smooth, steady, old school." Martha didn't say much about it, just raised an eyebrow, cracked open a bottle, took one sip, and nodded approvingly. But for Ethan, none of it compared to a moment that happened quietly, without cameras or fanfare. 1 week later, a familiar patrol car rolled up to the curb. It was Officer Kinslow. He wasn't there for paperwork, no questions, no incident. He just came by to check in. Ethan met him on the porch. The officer glanced at the house, at the patched ceiling inside, then back at Ethan. He smiled. "My mom would have loved your grandma." Ethan didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. Kinslow continued, "I've been on the job 16 years, seen a lot of people react to fear. Most freeze, some run, few stand firm. Your grandmother, she didn't flinch. She understood what that moment was." There was a pause, a kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. "Wish there were more like her," Kinslow said finally, then tipped his head and walked back to his car. As the cruiser pulled away, Ethan looked back at the house. The same place he grew up in, the same porch his grandmother had tended flowers on for decades. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. Martha Wayne never made a big deal out of what happened. There were no stories retold over and over, no smirks, no boasting, just the same quiet presence, the same slow, deliberate way she moved through the house, like nothing had changed. But Ethan knew better. He tried bringing it up once, late at night when the house was still and the world felt small and honest. They were sitting in the living room. A movie played in the background, forgotten. The light from the TV flickered across the room. Ethan looked over and said, "You know, I still can't believe you did that." Martha didn't look up. She just reached for her glass of water, took a slow sip, and let the silence breathe. Then she finally spoke. "Next time they knock," she said, voice low and even, "you knock back harder." She didn't say it with anger. There was no edge, no heat. It was just truth, simple, heavy, real. After a moment, she stood up, knees cracking slightly as she straightened. She walked to the back door, grabbed her evening tea from the counter, and stepped out onto the porch. That same shotgun, clean, oiled, and resting by the doorway, leaned where it always did. Not out of fear, not for show, just because it belonged there. The porch creaked beneath her weight. She lowered herself into her chair, leaned back, and took a long sip, eyes on the dark sky above the quiet street. For Martha, that was enough. No medals, no interviews, no need to go viral. She hadn't done it to prove anything. She did it because when someone threatens your home, your peace, you don't ask what you should do. You do what you must. The world, Ethan realized, might always be full of people who push too far, who take without asking, pretend to be something they're not, hoping no one will stop them. But sometimes all it takes is one old woman with nothing to prove, nothing to gain, and everything to protect to remind them, not every door opens. Some bite back. And this one? This one bit back hard and never needed to say a word about it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to our channel for more incredible real-life stories. Drop a comment below about what you thought of Martha's courage. Stay safe everyone, and remember, not all heroes wear capes. Some wear nightgowns and hold shotguns.